It's This Week in Charles Bronson, the highly uncalled for news and pop culture program that revolves around one weirdo in his community's love of the late action movie star, Charles Bronson. And tonight, it's July 4th, 1963, and we're talking about the ensemble action packed World War II epic, The Great Escape, directed by John Sturges and based on a true story, believe it or not, but they took a lot of liberties there. It stars, of course, Steve McQueen, James Garner, Richard Attenborough, Donald Pleasance, James Coburn, and of course, Charles Bronson. And our guest is Dan Fisher from the Let's Take 10 podcast. He has worked in film and television industry since 1986 as a prop master and set dresser. Some of his credits include the films Black Swan, one of my favorites, and American Hustle, and such television shows as Law and Order and The Americans. And so I guess in 2023, during the writer's strike, you started a podcast, huh?
Yeah, and I gotta mildly correct you. It's Let's Talk 10,
What did I
not
say?
Let's Take 10,
Oh,
as if we do so many mistakes on the show that we
let's
got to hit 9 takes before we get the 10th one correct.
let's take 10 minutes. Let's talk 10.
Let's Talk 10,
I know
because
the name. I'm a big fan, and
oh,
my intro. I always make a mistake in my intro, and I would redo it, but that was probably the best take I've ever done with that, with the exception of that. I usually stutter or stumble a little bit, but it's.
uh,
I think it's cool that you have a pop culture podcast. So do I. Mine started during COVID, during the and plus Charles Bronson's 100th birthday was in 2022, which was during COVID, and yours started during the White Writers strike. And both of us now are just rolling in dough because of podcasts. Is that correct?
that's correct. You get into podcasting to make lots and lots of money and
Yes.
acquire all kinds of fame.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and if you stay tuned, I'll sell you all of this crypto I've got going on here with my face on it.
Now, before we get into the movie, let's talk about Let's Talk 10. I've listened to a few episodes. I really enjoyed the one where you did the top 10. You have a guest on, and they're all very interesting guests. You have a lot of younger people on, which I think is really cool. And you have some guys our age too. And you the one I listened to, well, I listened to a few, but the one I really liked recently was the top 10 TV families.
Oh,
Yeah. And
yeah.
then you also have had guests like we do, like you had um a voiceover artist, you had
Bob Bergen, who does
Bob
the
Bergen, yes.
voice of Porky Pig, and we did our top 10 favorite voiceover artists.
Hmm.
Sometimes, though, I stray from the top 10 idea. If I get somebody on that's just so special, or also sometimes I don't know if I want to make them do homework before they come on.
Right.
I've had some 90 somethings, and so
Yes.
kind of take a little of that into account. I had George Schlatter, who's creator of Laugh-In. And
Mm.
so it was just a pleasure to be with him. And Dick DiBartolo, who was
Mad Magazine, right?
Mad's maddest writer. He's written for more stuff than anybody for Mad Magazine. He was a childhood hero of mine. I knew who he was,
Hmm.
along with all of the usual gang of idiots. So yeah,
Yes.
it started for me, I had the time once the strike came, but it had been germinating in me because I love lists. When I have trouble sleeping, which it sounds like you might have last night, when I have trouble sleeping, I form lists in my head. I just pick a category in my head and I see if I can make it to 10. And usually I conk out by 8 or so. And that's good. That's what I want. But if I'm driving in a car, I'm like, what are the top 10 sequels of all time? Or what are my top
Mm.
10 favorite Madonna songs? It can be anything. I just choose it and I run with it. So the fun thing with the show is to get somebody who's kind of an expert and to talk with them about what are their top 10. And if there's overlap, there's overlap. I mean, I had a guy who was in charge of all of the reissues of Motown songs, Motown albums for Motown. That it was his job. He's the producer of it. So we had to pick out of the hundreds of Motown songs that we each love, just 10. And that's tricky as hell. And we did have some overlap, which gave us more time to go into why we love Stevie Wonder's Superstition, things like that. So it's fun for me. I hope it's fun for people who listen to the show.
It's kind of similar what we do here. We'll talk about a Charles Bronson movie, but we also talk about its date of release, what was on TV at the time, what was on the charts. And so, I mean, obviously, you're talking about The Great Escape. You see Donald Pleasance, so you might go off into a little tangent about the Halloween films, or you see
Sure.
James Gardner, you go off on a tangent on one of my favorite TV shows ever, Rockford Files. So
Hmm.
it's kind of similar, and yeah, maybe you'll have me on one day and we'll do like top 10 movie tough guys or something like that.
That would be great. I've done action movies already, but Tough Guys would certainly be fitting in there. And that's a good one for the summer too, when people go to see movies that very often star tough guys or action movies. So yeah, let's definitely hook up for that one.
All right, Dan's pushing me off to the summer. You heard that. All right, cool.
Oh, my
So
schedule's filled already. I got all kinds of
I know
good
you're a
stuff going on.
busy guy. So you keep it going. We do this when we can. I'm a busy guy with being a dad. I'm an old dad. I had a son at 40. I mean, son at 4. I had a son at 40 and I'm 49, so I have a 9-year old. And so I do this whenever I can. And sometimes that's 1 in the afternoon on a Thursday here in Hollywood, Pennsylvania. I had some Scrapple before this. Have you ever had
It's
Scrapple?
I've resisted Scrapple. I've certainly had plenty of opportunity. I might have had it when I was a kid. I'm originally a Pennsylvania guy myself.
What
Um,
part?
I was born in McKeesport, which is a suburb of Pittsburgh, and lived
Okay.
lived in the Pittsburgh area till I was about 6. Then we moved to West Virginia, which is where I grew up. And so, yeah, I've had my chance to eat Scrapple and all kinds of interesting meat products. But I'm like the world's pickiest eater from an early age. I was like, no, if it's not like a hamburger or it's not something that's put into a mix something or other, no, no. And I've kind of followed that for the rest of my life, unfortunately. So I've
Well, no, it's
tried.
probably a good thing. I don't think Scrapple's very good for you.
It's not, well, I'm a heart transplant recipient as well. So I have the feeling that Scrapple is on the no-no list.
You have a heart. You have somebody else's heart inside you.
I do. I do. And that was in
That I do
2000.
not want you to have any Scrapple then,
Yeah, no Scrapple for
or
me.
Taylor ham. You call pork roll Taylor ham. Is that correct?
I I don't eat pork roll. If I did, I'd call it forbidden. So there you
Okay.
go. Anything with
So
high
as you can
levels of
see, we
salt like
stray
that.
from Charles Bronson as well. We
Oh,
stray
the
way off the.
tangents are the good stuff, really. I mean, Charles Bronson's great, and I'm happy to talk about him, but I love going down a trail.
Oh my God! It's. I mean, what is a podcast or a podcaster if it's especially in the world of pop culture if it's not a person who loves to go down rabbit holes, you know?
Yeah. Well, unlike you, I edit the hell out of my show. I make no secret about it. And I take what can sometimes be a 3-hour conversation and I have to distill it down to about an hour, I think. Because
Yeah.
in my case, at least, I feel that since I'm kind of a nobody out there and there's millions of other people doing what I do and what you do, it's like, okay, if I make it less than an hour, I give one less excuse for people to not listen to the show. It's like, okay, it's only an hour and I got to commute to work, so I'll
Yeah.
give it a shot. That's my thinking. Not that it's necessarily helped get a bunch of listeners in, but I'm working on that.
We keep this show to about an hour, hour 15, sometimes hour and a
Yeah.
half. But I mean, and that's literally how long we'll be here talking to because like I said, like I am, I work in strange hours. I have a 9-year-old child,
Yeah.
but I want you to, but you are not a nobody to me because I like what I would call, and maybe I don't know if this word doesn't insult you, but I like amateur podcasting. I like you're on my top 10. A show called Fanacheck. He knows that he's one of my favorites. Another one
Uh,
called Exploding Helicopter, where they only talk about movies where a helicopter exploded. Um,
good.
Teenage Golden Age is a good one, and I listened to Gilbert and Frank when they were on. I have to admit, there's no I mean, that was the one I couldn't stay away from, and it's hard to stay away from anything that Dana Gould does. But I really don't want to give my support to. to celebrity podcasts when there's guys like me and you out there talking about their 10 favorite cereal mascots or their 10 favorite uh I'm
Charles
reading the
Bronson movies or whatever.
Charles Bronson movies, yeah, which is what we could do, but you don't know 10 Charles Bronson movies, do you?
I could probably name 10, but I've probably seen out of those 10, 3 or maybe 4 at tops.
Right.
But
And plus, if I was on somebody else's podcast, I would like it to be in the realm of Bronson, but I would like to talk something maybe a little different.
I don't listen. I listen to Mark Maron still, and he's
He's
certainly
good.
a
Yeah, he's
celebrity.
really good.
But he started, he only became a celebrity really because of his podcasts. And
That's it, and that's kind of an exception in a way. Like you're
yeah,
right. You're absolutely right about that. He kind of
yeah,
made podcasting like put it on the map. If you could
yeah.
put an
Well,
audio
yeah.
program on a map.
Well, I'd known him. I'd worked. He has no memory of it because I met him once. But I'd worked on a show he had been a part of called what's it called? Something Theater. Anyway, I'd worked on a Comedy Central show that he had been a part of, and he had no memory of it when I met him. But so I tuned in very early on to his podcast. I think I'm an OG WTFer. I like the Flophouse a lot too, and those guys have
Hmm.
gotten some amount of fame and success. I think that's become their source of income, which is great. And they started
Hmm.
from their living rooms in Brooklyn doing it. And now they've got
Right.
studio time and they're doing tours and all of this. Good for them. But
Hmm.
I agree with you. I don't think Conan O'Brien really needs any more attention or income.
Right.
I don't think that Oprah does. I understand
No.
why people want to listen to those people. And even Gilbert's show, I think a lot of people listened because they knew who Gilbert was. And I'm working on getting people to know who I am, and I'm sure you are
Hmm.
too. And we've got enough people. It's not like we've got nobody. And we're not doing it, I think, for the ratings. We're doing it for there's subjects we're passionate about, and we're hoping that others are passionate about the stuff we love. And that's what my show's about too. It's not about these are the best things of all time and you have to watch them or you're an idiot. It's
Right. Right.
not that at all. And I think I've listened to your show, which I enjoy a lot. And you say the same thing. It's like, that some of these Charles Bronson movies, especially from the 80s, they're not great cinema,
Right.
but they're fun. You enjoy them and they hit your sweet spot for whatever reason.
Right.
And there's no reason to apologize for that. I hate
Hmm.
that phrase of guilty pleasures. There should
I
be
hate that phrase too. It's funny you say that. I hate that phrase too.
There should be no guilty pleasures. Does it give you pleasure? Does it not hurt anybody else? Then done. I don't care what you think about the original trilogy versus the new Star Wars movies. If you think that The Phantom Menace is a better movie than the 1977 Star Wars, I'll disagree with you. But you know what? What does it harm me to let you have your fun? I get it too. I grew up, I was OG Star Wars in
Oh
77.
yeah.
And I know people who grew up in the 90s. So Phantom Menace was their first Star Wars, and there's nothing like your first time. So,
Hmm.
okay, fine. I'm not going to argue. I might talk about it and bring you on the show for us to talk about it. That's cool. But we don't get mean. I don't like getting in the hive mind of nerd culture. It's like, what
Right.
do you like? That's enough.
Yeah, I only get mean on this show when people bring up this Charles Bronson imitator named called they call him Bronzy. He's this Hungarian guy who looks like him, and they're making movies now, like now, with this guy in it. And people are trying to pull him off. Is that an expression? I don't know. Put him over as the new Bronson, and like to assume that just because he looks like him, like he doesn't have any of the charisma. And so that's the only time I get mean and get turned into a real Bronson nerd. And some of my listeners they don't agree because I hear he's a real nice guy, so I don't wish him any ill, and I don't blame the guy for making money. But I just that's my big nerd stance. And speaking of Charles Bronson, in this film, he's the Tunnel King, Danny, and he
Annie, that's my name.
and your name's Danny, and my
Well,
producer, the
to my mom, I'll always be Danny, and to my
well,
sisters, I'll always be Danny. And my high school friends that I still have, I'm Danny. But the rest of us,
well, well, Bronson was Danny the Tunnel King. You're Danny the Talk King, and of course we have my producer dot slash editor is the teenage heartthrob Danny Getz, but but you worked on a show that I and my father loved, because me and my father share a very bizarre sense of humor, called The Adventures of Pete and Pete. And
This is
there is an episode that you talk about on a recent show of yours where Pete, one of the Petes, I believe it was the younger Pete, if I remember the episode correctly, tunnels out of his house, much like the Great Escape, to see a Fourth of July fireworks.
this is true. That's exactly the plot. And we we made Pete and Pete in the 90s, early 90s. I was in my probably late 20s, early 30s at that point. It was a great fun time. We got paid crap and we had no budget whatsoever. But yet we
Yeah,
these scripts where it was like Pete blows up a statue or Pete digs a tunnel under his
right.
house to escape to the fireworks in the park. And so in this case, yeah, we had to get this gigantic PVC pipe, a certain amount of length of it, and we created a fake tunnel and a fake tunnel set. And I was a prop master for that show, by the way. But we all kind of helped out however we could to get this show made. And when I have to be honest, I've never. The Great Escape was one of those movies that was on my list of movies to see that I hadn't seen. And then finally, recently, I was like, I got to see this movie. It's been too long. It's on the list of 1,001 movies you have to see before you die. And I'm up to the 600s now. I should see The Great Escape. And I watched it, and there are sequences in there. We matched it shot for shot. Adventures of Pete and Pete, which was a kids show for
Right,
Nickelodeon. They're not going to get that reference more than likely. But
right.
we did it for maybe the parents sitting down with the kids or the older brother or
Mhm.
sister, because our music too was very kind of grunge rock and stuff.
Yeah, I remember loving the theme song. You and I are about 10 years apart, so I was about 16 or 17 when that was on. And that was when Nickelodeon was kind of cutting edge. Like it was a
Yeah,
really original network. And the fact that my dad enjoyed the show too. So my dad was 27 years older than me, so he was in his early 40s. Like we just really like, we loved that show. We loved Get a Life. So I probably did get the reference. But isn't it cool like to talk about that influence? Isn't it cool how sometimes someone or something can be influenced by something and they don't even realize they're influenced by it. Like I believe there's a lot of pop culture influence. It's hard to explain what I'm trying to say, but like, okay, I'll give you an example. Like when I was a kid, I remember on Growing Pains or one of those shows, one of the kids went Stella. Now I had never seen Streetcar Named Desire, but I knew what that was. I knew
right.
that was a famous pop culture thing. I think it's neat how pop culture can kind of influence things. Sometimes, sometimes it's subconscious, younger people can be influenced by say if they're like me and Burt Kearns talked about this. The image of Brando in The Wild One. I mean, that has influenced almost every generation, there's been a magazine cover with a new star in leather and their hair slicked back and some kind of and they might go, oh, this is Grease or this is that, but but really the photographer might be thinking Brando, like depending on the age of the person. Like, do you
I know
understand
I'm
what
the
I'm saying?
wild one. That's
Hmm.
really the first of that, you know. I mean, it wasn't the first motorcycle flick, but it was one
Hmm.
of the first, and it was certainly the first, very influential one. Yeah, but I know Bert too. He's been on the show. He's great. I love Bert.
Bert's the best. Like you said in the beginning of this show, that you sometimes when you have guests, you stray from the top 10. Well, I'll stray from Charles Bronson to do anything with Bert. We had him
Sure.
and Dwayne Epstein on arguing whether or not Marlon Brando and Lee Marvin's characters were gay in that film. So that
Hmm.
was that. I mean, that was one of the most fun hour and a half I ever had because it was just like, I mean, because those two guys are friends. Um, they weren't really arguing, but Dwayne's very passionate. Like, and it was just it was funny, and it's a good episode, and you'd have to
Well,
check
there's
out.
certainly, let's just say there's homoerotic overtones to that.
Right.
Basically,
Hmm.
any movie that has pretty much exclusively all guys in the cast, whether it's The Wild One or Top Gun, or, perhaps somebody could find homoerotic overtones in The Great Escape,
Well,
tunnels
you
and
know what?
I
At the
don't
very
know,
end,
but
at the very end of the movie, when Charles Bronson, unfortunately, Danny, and I believe his friend was named Willie. I got my notes here.
yeah.
Um, they were both the Tunnel Kings. When they show them in that boat, paddling up to that bigger ship, they played like a romantic music. It was strange. It was strange. But let's jump into this
Well,
movie a little bit.
not
We're
that
not going
there's
to talk.
anything.
What's
I'm
that?
sorry, as Jerry Seinfeld would say, not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right, right. It just,
Can I just say
I
one
just,
thing before we jump ahead? And I'm going to
yeah,
tangent you for just a
go
second.
crazy.
It's your show, not mine. I know this.
No, you do whatever you
But
want.
yeah, I mean, I think what you're doing, what I do, and what movie makers and storytellers do is we take the stuff we love, whether it's Brando, or whether it's the lick from Johnny Be Good, and
Hmm.
we want to keep it alive. We want people to go, who was Charles Bronson? Who was Chuck Berry? Or,
Hmm.
listen, you talk subconscious plagiarism, George Harrison with My
Yeah,
Sweet
yeah.
Bird. That was He's So Fine by the Chiffons. It
Hmm.
and he claimed he didn't know it, but it happens, and it still happens where you think you come up with this great idea, all original, and you realize no, it's been done already. It's been done. List how many movies have been basically copycats of Death Wish? That same
Right.
thing. He's been pushed too far. That goes back. Listen, that goes back to the westerns. I'm sure, really, Death Wish
Right.
is a western, just set in the grungy 1970s New York City streets.
That's what it's funny you say that because that's what I say. It's a revenge fantasy. It's an urban Western revenge fantasy. I mean, it's a beautiful picture, but also a disgusting picture at the same time, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
No, a lot
So
of people misinterpreted that. And I know we're not here to talk about Death Wish, although that is one of the Charles Bronson movies I've seen.
we can talk about anything. This show is pretty, and this movie's 3 hours long, so we're not going to talk about everything that happens in the movie.
No.
But I do like the opening scene. I like that when they all show up,
Hmm?
right away, the second they get to this prison camp, they're all looking, they're all doing their part, looking to see how to escape. McQueen's picking up the dirt to see what the dirt's like. James Garner's character is eyeing the guard tower. David McCullum is looking under the campers. James Coburn tastes the water. I'm not sure why he does that. Um, and Bronson, who is Danny, the Tunnel King, he mentions somebody mentions that it's 250 feet to the trees, and he says it's a long way to dig. So right away, they're already planning their escape, which I think is really cool. I like that it gets right to the point. And
Yeah.
then they try and escape, dressing up as Russian prisoners. And that scene was almost kind of slapstick, almost kind of
Hmm. Oh, it's
Three
funny.
Stooges-ish, like putting on the hats and everything, and trying to just walk out the second they come in. Um, and I
Well,
just
I like scenes like that too, because a lot of times now, especially in the streaming age, where we're all sitting on our couches and we're
Mhm.
talking a lot, right? My wife will be talking to me while I watch a movie. Not that she watched The Great Escape with me, but we'll be sitting on the couch and we'll right away we'll be doubting Thomas's. We'll be like, well, why don't they just try this? What?
Right,
And then they show you in that first scene, it's not going to be easy, folks. These are not Hogan's Heroes Nazis. That they're, these
right.
Nazis have at least enough sense to pick up on all they're trying to put on different clothes and go out with all the Russians, or any of the other cheap things. They've seen this stuff before.
Right. And they do they are all moved there. If you listen to the dialogue, they're all brought there because they have attempted escapes from other prisons.
Yes.
But that's the part that kind of jumped out at me because I didn't feel like that prison seemed like it was real maximum security. They had the barbed wire, they had the towers, but when they were digging for hours and hours, nobody came. Like I work in a mental health facility and I have to do hourly checks to make sure people are in the house or in their rooms. And this was a Nazi prison camp, and they didn't come around and do any checks for like hours while they were down in tunnels and stuff. But I guess you have to suspend disbelief a little bit and have a little
And
bit of fun.
maybe, listen, I'm even at age 60, my main reference is other movies when it comes to that period of time, the 1940s, and History
Mhm.
Channel when it comes to World War II. And technology was certainly not much of anything in those times, very crude, and resources were limited. It was coming towards, I think was it coming towards the end of the war? So, they couldn't necessarily start with the finest materials and so forth. But I don't know, maybe they just had a lot of optimism, and yeah, that and the person in charge of the camp was certainly no Colonel Klink, but on the other hand, they made him kind of humanistic, and they made him empathetic to the prisoners to an extent. He says, "Look, just stick around this joint for a while, and the war's going to be over soon. You get to walk out
Mhm.
of here free." And
Now they did. There was so they did show a little empathy, and even a couple of the guards did too. And are you a Jewish gentleman? No.
I am
Okay.
not, but my wife is, and my children are.
I just wonder. I wonder what. Like, I'm interested in what a Jewish person would think about the way that some of the Nazis were portrayed in this, because I think, not to jump too far ahead, but that the one that keeps throwing Hilt in the cooler,
Mhm.
Steve McQueen's character. I don't think he shows sympathy, but he shows a little bit of amusement, like he's amused by uh
Uh,
by McQueen, and may even have a little bit of sympathy for him.
Again, maybe this is because the war is winding down, and
Hmm.
maybe everybody's just getting kind of tired. I don't know. Or maybe it just makes it too difficult for the plot to develop if the Nazis are just and they're Luftwaffe. That's part of the thing too, is this is a camp run by the Luftwaffe, which I don't know much about, but they keep saying through the movie, it's like, you should be fortunate that we in the Luftwaffe are looking over you versus, Hitler's, Nazi regime.
Right.
I
And I
guess
looked and I wrote that down. I have it right here on the top of this paper, Luftwaffe, and I forgot to look it up. But
me too.
I had a feeling that must mean something like a little lower, like security, like it would like not as it wasn't a concentration camp, I should say.
Yeah, look at I have, there is that thing of like, well, it's not a documentary, you should just
Right.
relax. It's a movie. I have a certain very flexible bullshit meter of what I'm willing
Hmm.
to do, how much disbelief I'm willing to suspend and how much I'm not. It goes movie to movie. It depends on my mood, depends on a lot of stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm willing to go on this journey with these guys. And what I was surprised about, by the way, too, is that yeah, it's a 3 hour movie. It moves fast. It's one of
Yes.
those, it's not really a long 3 hours. I mean, a 90-minute bad movie feels interminable.
Yes. Yes.
A great 3 hour movie like this or The Godfather,
Hmm.
you dip through it. You come out of the trance and you're like, what happened? Oh my God. But but what surprised me too was I thought this was going to be like nonstop action. It's
Right.
it's a caper film. It's
Right.
really like a bank heist movie where yeah, as you described at the beginning, we get to know each of the characters and their particular talents, right?
Right.
We're going to need somebody to bring those talents to work in coordination, and that's Sir Richard Attenborough as
Hmm.
Big X. He's the one that really gets them to work together.
And
And
by the way, every Charles Bronson movie, there's a character that is like my next favorite character or the standout character, and that was Dickie Attenborough in this film. I loved his character as Big X Bartlett. I
yeah,
loved him in this film,
I thought all the
and
characters were really well developed
uh,
and
they
very
were
well
good.
cast, very
And
well.
Hans Mesmer was a German actor, right? Who
Mhm.
played the commandant.
Yeah.
So he, in real life, what fought for the Germans on the Eastern Front, which was some kind of thing between them and the Russians during World War II. and he was captured by Russians and escaped. So there's a real escape artist in this film.
Hmm.
I
I
found
did
that
not know that.
very interesting.
Did not know that.
And David McCullum, he had a wife named Jill Ireland who escaped him to marry Charles Bronson.
I did not know that either. See, you are the IMDb trivia section of this show.
Wait, you didn't know that? Don't call me IMDb, even though that's probably what I'm reading. Yeah, no, I hate. You didn't know that Jill Ireland was married to David McCullum?
I didn't because I'm not a total Bronson head like you. I enjoy the movies, but I didn't do digging on this one.
So they met. Well, I've known this for years, but they met on the set of that movie, and Charles Bronson said to David McCullum, "I'm going to marry your wife." Now, for a long time, I think the Hollywood lore was Bronson stole her from him and all that. But as I do more research and I talk to more people, it turns out like her and McCullum were kind of on the outs already, and and Bronson stepsons and David and all of them, they all stayed friends, and it was a amicable thing. But you know,
No,
Hollywood loves legends, so they love
yeah.
the idea of Charles Bronson saying, "I'm taking your wife" and running off with her over his shoulder. But
I
that's
mean,
not how it
listen,
happened.
okay, good. I'm just saying if that were true, that's a very bold and dare I say, cuckoldy move on Bronson.
I know, right?
Not just I'm going to have her for a night. I'm going to take her away. I mean, the same way Steve McQueen did with Ollie McGraw, later on, taking her from
Right.
Robert Evans. If you want to say taking her as if she was a prize, which has problematic elements to it.
Right, it does. Richard Attenborough, he has links to this program. We had actress Jan Gann Boyd on, and she started out as a dancer, and she was in Chorus Line, which was directed by Richard Attenborough. And Richard Attenborough was friends with director Peter Hunt. So he talked to Peter Hunt and got her the part with Charles Bronson in the 1987 film. It was not very good film, but it was a film called Assassination.
Mhm.
So how do you like that link? Dickie Attenborough. That's what she called him when she was on the show.
A lot of people.
She loved Richard Attenborough. And I'm just going over some of the cast right now because it's such a great cast. Donald Pleasance, often referred to as an over actor. I enjoy over actors a lot.
Mhm.
What is your thought on what some people call over actors?
It depends on the tone of the movie. If
Mm-hmm.
what you want is a large operatic movie, like the stuff Ken Russell made back in the 70s, or sometimes in the horror genre, you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to play it. You don't want to play it small. You need to play it big. And it also helps if either the rest of the cast is playing more or less at that pitch, or if you just want to, you have one character that's meant to stand out as a bit of an oddball. But it's
Mm-hmm.
really up to the director to make sure that tone matches up with the rest so it doesn't take you out of the movie. It depends. And listen, I've been on set where I've seen under actors where I thought, oh my God, this is the most boring performance I've ever seen. But then when it cuts together, it's like, oh, I didn't notice how subtle everything was and how exciting this is. So I like underacting in general. I think in film especially.
I don't think Donald Pleasance overacted in this film either.
No, I
But
don't.
14 years later, he was in a movie called Telephone with Charles Bronson, and he does some overacting in that. But he plays a Russian like a Russian agent who kind of went AWOL and went berserk, and I love it. It's fun. It's almost comical. There's a part where he's wearing a weird wig in
Yeah.
disguise, and it's not supposed to be comical, but it kind of is. It was a oh god, Don Siegel film, the man who made
Yeah.
Dirty Harry and uh
Escape from Alcatraz. He made, yeah, those tough guy movies. Um, I like my share of cheesy movies and so bad
mhm.
for good movies. I'm an MST3K fan.
Oh
So
yeah.
I think it just depends on if you've got this just some actors just recognize I'm in this outrageously stupid movie. I might as well play to the rafters until somebody tells me not to. And oftentimes that's the most entertaining part of the thing. It's like, let's just liven up this turkey with some hysterics here. Why not?
I have a saying that I have said on about 3 or 4 episodes, but I'll say it again because it's become kind of like my catchphrase. The last thing a movie needs to be for me to like it is good. I mean, I enjoy cinema. Don't get me wrong, my top 20, 30 favorite movies, uh, I would say 10 of them are bad and the others are good films. But I like when I watch a movie, I'm more interested in how movies are made. I'm more interested in looking up the director, looking up the actors, looking up those people that nobody knows, the side characters, the character actors. So when I watch a movie, if it entertains me and there's it's not a total piece of shit where it doesn't make any sense. Like I can really I really like to watch, like I love to watch B movies, like you just said, Mystery Science Theater, because I feel like when you watch B movies of the up from the 50s up through the 70s and 80s, because they're cheap and because they had to do what they could with the budget, I feel like you get a little bit of an education on how a film is made. Fred Olen Ray, I bring him up on this show a lot. He's never worked with Charles Bronson, but he's a B movie icon.
I know him.
You know who Fred Olen Ray is,
Yeah, of
and I
course.
yeah. So a lot of his earlier movies, you watch them and you kind of like. Well, I mean, some of them had like zero budget, and you see you kind of like get a little bit of an education on how to make more out of less, if that
Uh-huh.
makes sense. And I
Yeah.
enjoy that.
Yeah, and like I said, it depends on the mood. I mean, I can be as entertained by something like My Dinner with Andre or a Merchant in Ivory film as I am with
Mhm.
something with explosions and helicopters. Just because if I'm into the characters, if there's just something about it of interest to me, you don't have to blow things up to make me interested. I can be bored
Mhm.
watching a Marvel movie if I don't care about what the characters are doing and I think I know ahead of time what's going to happen by the end. If I'm surprised, I go to movies personally to be surprised. That's what I want.
Mhm.
I want to see something I haven't seen before. And I want somebody to fool me where I think they're going in a direction and they flip it on me. I love that. So and again, it depends
Mhm.
on my mood. Sometimes I want dumb popcorn stuff just like anybody else. Hey,
Right.
I don't, it's your show and everything, but we haven't even gotten through the credits, I think. And we're,
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Well, basically, so they try their first escape and all that, and pretty much we get the first Heil Hitler of the film from one of the Nazis, and you get We meet Bartlett again, who's played by Richard Attenborough, Big X, and he has one of the first cool lines in the film. He says, "I'm going to cause such a terrible stink in this Third Reich." I think
yeah,
I should have. That's such a great line,
yeah,
and right from there, I think that's what kicked it off as as for me really enjoying his character. And then he says tonight and they call he says tonight we're call a meeting, and they call the meeting and they start planning it at the dig, you know what I mean?
uh-huh.
And then we meet the forager, Colin Donald Pleasance, and you can tell that they're setting his character up to be a little bit of a weirdo, a little bit of a eccentric. Um, Danny starts to prepare the dig. Now the digging, this just digging is kind of a mundane, boring task. And somehow I feel like the filmmakers in this made it seem really interesting.
Oh,
There was
yeah.
there was collapses in the tunnel, then they had to get wood in. They had to figure out how to take the dirt out and not have big mounds of dirt. I mean, we talk about a 3 hour movie that really didn't have as much action as you would think,
Right.
but yet
Everybody talks about the motorcycle jump. That doesn't happen till like, 20 minutes before the end.
right, and that's like an iconic thing, like where everybody
It
knows
is.
that picture of McQueen on the motorcycle. But
It's
how
on the
many?
DVD cover. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I think they found they made the digging seem interesting, and David McCullum's character, Lieutenant Pitt, Ashley Pitt, he figures out the way of sneaking the dirt out with some socks down the pants, it's almost in a way, in a weird way, there's almost like a screwball comedy hidden underneath the surface of this movie. Like, not like, or not a screwball comedy, but like a, well, yeah, but like a little tweak could have turned this into like an Animal House, a Hogan's
Sure.
Heroes, for say.
Uh-huh.
But like, it's just slightly comical. It's very subtle.
I
Um,
agree. I agree. And that's what keeps it entertaining.
mhm.
You could have given it a very dark tone. And I think also I've recently watched The Dirty Dozen, and
Uh,
that's a very different tone, right? Because it is a much harsher environment. It's similar environments,
mhm.
but it's approached more harshly. And the characters are all manly men, they're all,
Yeah.
like they all just have so much testosterone flowing out of their ears, and the men in The Great Escape are certainly very masculine, and they're all soldiers. They're all in the military. But David McCallum isn't going to be like Lee Marvin, and neither is
Mhm.
Donald Pleasance, nor even James Garner, who is very macho, but it's a quiet macho. It's a relaxed macho.
I was thinking that earlier, that their characters are very vulnerable. Like we learned that Danny, Charles Bronson's character, is claustrophobic.
Right.
I think this movie, I'm not sure which one came out first, but I think this movie and the Dirty Dozen are two movies often spoken in the same sentence or breath, but
Right.
they're polar opposite type of characters, really. This is more like this movie, like,
This came out first, by the way. IMDb
yeah,
67 for Dirty Dozen, and of course the Great Escape is 63, as you pointed out.
for the time period, this movie allowed men to be vulnerable and almost and sensitive and even like there's even like they get like, when James Coburn gets helped by those French guys, and they help him get to Spain. Like there's like a kindness in this film where Dirty
Yeah.
Dozen is just. And by the way, if you like the Dirty Dozen, we had a guest on, Dwayne Epstein. He wrote a book about the making of that movie. The making of that movie, it was more interesting than the movie itself. I mean, what an interesting story. But
Well, you were talking about that sense of vulnerability in masculinity at that time. And I'm nobody's tough guy at all.
Mhm.
I haven't really been in a fight since I was in first grade, and I hit my sister with my lunchbox and gave
Mhm.
her a black eye, and I regretted it. And I don't think I've hit anybody since. Um,
Right.
but I prefer that 60s masculinity of, like, even James Bond, who certainly hits plenty of
Mhm.
people, but he's not like, I'm the baddest guy around. And
Right.
and that's what I don't like a lot about the current form of what we think of as being masculine or macho, or this thing of,
Right.
I can bench press, a car. And it's like, I don't care. To
Mhm.
me, the really admirable masculine archetypes are the strong, silent ones. The
Yeah.
Gary Coopers, the Sean Connerys, the James Garner.
Even even Bogart. Well, anyway, a lot goes on. They make some potato hooch and they have a Fourth of July celebration where they all get looted. And that's when the Nazis search the hut and find the first tunnel. This is an hour and a half into the movie. Ives, the character of Ives, which who played Ives? Oh boy. Angus Lenny, Archie Ives. He just takes a run towards the fence. I call it him committing suicide. Like, I'm pretty sure he meant to commit suicide. And Steve McQueen's character, Hilt, tries to save him, and then the guys just they just can't handle it. Once they see Ives get shot by the Nazis, it's on. And Steve McQueen, I believe it's McQueen character Hilt, says, "I'm going out tonight." And Dickie, Richard Attenborough, who's my breakout star in the movie, says, "Open up, Harry, dig around the clock." So they start digging again, even though the Nazis found that tunnel and shot Ives and killed him.
Didn't they say in the plans it was going to be 3 tunnels?
There was going to be yeah, separate tunnels.
Yes.
And you know what? And I believe McQueen's character, were we meant to, I have a little bit of a learning disability where I don't there's a great disability to have when you do a film podcast. But sometimes I misunderstand things. But was McQueen's character meant to be like the fall guy, like because he could take the days in the cooler, like it was like, all right, I'll try this because if I get caught, it's no big deal if I'm in the cooler as long as I got my ball, my glove.
I think he was eventually meant to be. Yeah, I mean, he eventually
Hmm.
his ability to withstand life in the cooler became part of the overall plan. Originally,
Yeah,
his character was all for himself, right? It's that
right.
evolution of I'm looking out for number one, and by the end, he becomes part of the team.
Yeah, and I think that's another beautiful thing about the movie is they all become close. They start digging, and that well, actually, McQueen gets caught again, and that's the first time I thought that guard was like kind of looking at him. I don't know if it was sympathetic, but like it was almost like when a dog turns his head like this, it was almost like a curiosity,
Mhm.
like this guy's like maybe he felt a little bit for him, like not felt bad for him, but just felt like I admire this guy. Like he can he'll take he comes in here with his ball and his glove and he takes his lumps like a man. But
I
the
think
club,
anybody in the presence of Steve McQueen would be just in awe.
right,
For, let him let Steve
right.
McQueen do what he
But
wants.
he's a tough guy. He's a tough guy that often plays vulnerable type characters, you know?
Again, what we're just saying, he's very, very strong, but he doesn't advertise it. You can call him, you can call him a puke to his face, and he doesn't like immediately hit you. He just sort of stares at you and goes, "Say that again." And that's
Mhm.
the toughest response of all.
Right. Especially now you can do that.
No.
That was a joke because he passed a long time ago.
Oh, that's the joke. It's
I'm
you're
sorry.
no, it's above my head.
Tunnel collapses on Danny, Charles Bronson's character, and that's like, that's I think that's when he starts to get freaked out a little bit. I thought it was kind of weird that he didn't show any signs of claustrophobia until then, but that's okay. It's a movie. They get fake passports. They start disguising
Well, that's
themselves as
my,
German
but I don't
soldiers.
think, I don't, if I may, I don't
Hmm.
think that it was until the dirt really came down hard on him. We
Yeah, it
got,
was the second time the dirt came down, right?
yeah,
The
but it came
first
down
time is when
hard
they
on him.
start getting the
Practically
wood.
buried him. He had to, yeah, I think
Yeah.
it pulled out that it really triggered him. I think that was in what they call an inciting incident in screenplay classes. Not that I've ever taken one, but I've
Yeah.
heard things.
And then they get their fake passports. They start disguising themselves as German soldiers.
Uh-huh.
And then I believe there's the big then well, wait, did I miss it? No, I have it written down next. So the and is it Danny tries to go through the fence and he opens up about his fear of the tunnels, which I thought was like we all know America, and especially someone who's born in 1975 like me, we know this what I call Michael Winner version of Charles Bronson. Although Charles Bronson played a stone-faced, like no emotions tough guy before Michael Winner, I really feel like Michael Winner really, really brought that character out in Chato's Land and Death Wish. And even really in Death Wish, not really because he still has some emotions in the beginning of that. But people forget that he could play uh these vulnerable, sensitive characters. Machine Gun Kelly was a coward.
Mm.
He had to play a coward in that movie. He had to play cowardly and weak. Showdown at Boot Hill, which was one of his first starring roles in the 50s. He had a year in the 50s where he starred in 3 movies. I believe they were all B movies, and I think it's good that those weren't the movies. I'm glad that he did these ones in the 60s. But people forget that he had that ability. And I think by the time he had the chance to do that again in like Indian Runner or the television film Yes, Virginia, There's a Santa Claus, I feel like, and I hate to say this because I think his part in Indian Runner was very good, and he played it well. I feel like I feel like it was probably hard for him to remember how to play that because he just played he for lack of a I don't want my listeners to shut off the
Okay.
show. But he did sleepwalk through some of those 80s movies. At Death
I
Wish
think every
4,
actor,
he looked bored in Death Wish 4. Kinjite,
well,
I
he was
love
getting
that.
old too. You get
Hmm.
tired, you
Well,
know?
and Jill was dying too.
Yeah.
I mean, those are tough years for him.
And listen,
But
as a person who has spent, I've spent over 36 years of my life on a movie set.
mhm,
And before my heart transplant, they were on the set doing 14 to 16 hours every day.
mhm,
It's hard. And for actors too, they're up at 5 a.m. getting their makeup put on. They go home at night. And
yeah,
they've got to do it every day. If you're Bronson, you're number one on the call sheet. You're the reason the movie's being made.
right.
So there's a lot, not only in the terms of the making of the movie, you got to go out, you got to publicize it, you got to pretend you think a movie's great when you know it's not so great. It's
Mhm.
not an easy life. And I don't know how old he was by the time he had done like Death Wish 4, but yeah, he knew that was a paycheck movie.
Well, he was like, what was it now? Let me think. 52 when he finally broke big in America with Death Wish. So he started his film career in 1951.
Yeah.
He struggled. He was on and off TV. Playhouse Nine did. I mean, I'd love to talk about his TV work on one of these
He was
episodes
on
because his
Twilight
TV,
Zone.
Twilight Zone, Playhouse 90. He was in I think it was Playhouse 90 episode with Sammy Davis Jr. and Joe Besser. Yep. It was
Hugh
freaking
Curley, but that's not Joe Besser.
it was freaking cool. And then we find out Colin's going blind. And Garner says Colin's not blind, he's going with me. And that was nice that Garner's character uh
Can I jump back to Charles Bronson again for a second though? Because this
no,
is
not on this program, no.
not on this program.
No, of course you can. Of course you can go. That's a joke.
Well, again, I'm trying to, not commandeer the show too much and
No,
let
do
it.
whatever the hell you want. What do you think?
Okay. Well, I mean, I when you and I talked sometime about my being on this show, and I think my first response is, well, I haven't seen that many Bronson movies. I'd seen like the original Death Wish some
Mhm.
years ago, but it was when I saw The Great Escape that I was like, I know what movie I want to talk Charles Bronson with. I really liked him in this movie a lot because not only is he kind of sensitive in it, but I knew, listen, I'm an internet creature too. I'm always reading those stupid little trivia things that are probably
Mhm.
all written by AI at this point about,
Be careful of some of that AI. There's a lot of bullshit AI about Bronson,
yeah,
but
I
go on.
know. I know, but I have seen that stuff about, Charles Bronson, grew up in coal mining country and he
Mhm.
was so poor that he had to wear a dress to school. And
Right.
he worked in the mines when he was like 11 years old and
Right.
all
He
this
worked in
stuff.
an office. So he worked in an office at 11. He went into the mines in his teens. But
Yeah.
it sounds cooler to say he was 10 years old and went into the mines and started digging. But go on with what you were
No,
saying.
that's all right. Listen, I'm kind of from mining country, and perhaps there's
Mhm.
some in your neck of the woods too.
Yeah.
I don't care if you go in at 15 or 35. It's a hard life.
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
rough way to make a living. It makes being on a film set look like a tea party. And I really like that this was a role that Bronson could use his real life experience
Hmm.
and his incredible body. It's a
Yeah.
very literally physical performance. He's digging through a lot of his performance. Yeah, early on he's standing around and he's waiting his time, but once he gets digging, he becomes a machine. His
Right.
character is a machine, and I think that's what makes him go on, even with the claustrophobia. Is he puts in his head, I am a machine. I'm going to dig my way to freedom. I think that the desire for freedom makes him forget the fact, or not forget it, but just deny the fact within himself that he had these problems in the past of mines collapsing on him. which I think, I mean, the internet tells me, and you can tell me if it's bullshit. I think that Bronson supposedly had a bit of that himself from his years working in the mines.
Do know that the mines haunted him, and some people, like I believe his son and his stepson, Val McCullum, has a song called Charlie's Coal because he's a very um, prolific musician. He plays in Jackson Brown's band, but he has his own solo stuff. He has a song called Charlie's Coal, and it talks in there about how he would say like it never leaves your skin or your mind or your soul, like so certain people like Lee Marvin used to bust his chops and say, Charlie, like said that he would only saying that stuff to pick up women or whatever. But evidently, he always was talking about how bad it was down in those mines. And when he went to World War II, like, nowadays, you send me, if I was 20 and you send me to war, I'm going to shit my pants. But back then, people like my grandfather, who grew up in a steel mill town, and my grandmother grew up out that way too, where you're from, and worked in, they saw the world. He like they loved they loved the military. So when Bronson saw the
Mhm.
world, he said, "I'm never going back there. Like I'm never going back to those mines."
Uh-huh.
So yeah, but evidently those mines haunted him for a long time, according to some people. I'm very weary to say what's fact and what's not when it comes to pop culture or Hollywood, and especially when it comes to Charles Bronson, because like the thing about him in the dress, some people say that's not true. It was like something that um, you know, what's that called? The the agent or something made up. But
The
Bronson would tell,
publicist, the
but
publicist.
right, but Bronson would tell people that story, and I know that because on Gilbert's program, shit, the actor who was in Death Wish, who was also Angel on Rockford Files. Look at that,
Oh,
James
Stuart
Gardner.
Margolin. Stuart Margolin.
Stuart Margolin said Bronson told him that story, like when he
Yeah.
met him. And I don't know if you remember this, but he did the movie with Bronson, and he was flying home, and Bronson was, I guess, in the same airport. And Bronson came up to him in the bar and said, hi, I'm Charles Bronson." And he's like, and Stuart Margolin said, "I don't know if he realized he had just made a movie with me or not, because he didn't talk to me the whole time on the set." So, but that's the way Bronson allegedly was. He wasn't real personable on the set unless you were a child or like the makeup women. He would have poker games with the makeup women. Um, Jan Gann Boyd had a great relationship with him because she was a young woman. And Paul Talbot, who wrote two books about Charles Bronson, who's been a guest on here, thinks it's because his dad died young, and at 10 or 11, he was under, control of these older men in the mines, and he thinks that's why Charlie prefers the company of children. He loved his kids, even though they were all David McCullum's kids, except for the daughter that he had with Jill Ireland. He loved them. He loved spending time with them. And but yeah, that's what like allegedly, like he did tell that story to Stuart Mulgolin. Where Stuart said he never talked to me on set. He said, "I don't even know if he realized he had just made a movie with me." So I thought
Well,
that was kind of funny.
yeah, I think we all know usually guys like that that just don't like to talk. Uh,
Right.
they are literal men of action, not
Hmm.
necessarily blowing up things, but they prefer to work on your car as a way of saying I love you, or go in
Right. Yeah.
work every day to show that they care. And they're uncomfortable with extreme amounts of emotion or sentiment. And at the same time, we don't doubt that they love being with their families or love being with their friends. Um,
Right.
but we just sort of accept that's their version of love. And that's what I felt a very strong response to with Bronson in Great Escape. Was it this felt like a very personal role for him. I think that
Yeah.
that in a way, while he's digging and digging and digging, he's acting, he's recreating I mean, surely he mined coal without use of his bare hands, but still to be in those tight spaces and to have to just exert himself over and over and over, take one, two, three, four, five, dig, 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 that
Hmm.
had to bring him back to some extent to those days
Yeah.
of you keep digging coal, boy. Your shift ain't over for another
Hmm.
2 hours, you
And they
know,
got paid
by the
by the
tonnage.
ton or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My first movie I ever worked on was called Matewan, by the way, which was about coal miners in
Oh
West Virginia,
wow.
directed by a director named John Sayles.
I honestly got to play a union a real life union guy for the mines a film HBO film called Act of Vengeance. The name of the character is escaping me, but it was similar to his real life name. His real life name is Charles Buczynski,
Uh-huh.
and the character in Act of Vengeance was a real life union guy who was killed by, I don't know, I forget because it's been a while since I've
Well,
seen it. But
Matewan, the movie I did, was based on a real life historical incident. We filmed it in Thurman, West Virginia in '86. Again, my first movie. And
what year did the incident take place?
1919, I think. That was
Oh,
the
the old. Okay, so like the
Yeah, the
original.
Battle of Matewan, where the
Hmm.
state of West Virginia's governor at the time sent armed troops down to disrupt the coal mine unions and kill them. If you want to describe disrupt as kill
Yeah,
people, that's what they did.
Jacques Leblonsky was his character in Act of Vengeance.
Oh, that's a real life person. Yeah, I was head of the UMW at one time.
Some people say, some people say that what you're talking about, that incident,
Yeah.
is where the term redneck comes from. They say that I think it's that incident. It was a very early coal mining. There was gun battles and stuff, right? And they say the Union wore red scarves or something around their necks. Have you
I
ever
think
heard that?
I've heard it, but I've also heard that it comes from the Marines. Uh,
Yeah.
you
Hmm.
know, I think it's like the Charles Bronson wears a dress or Charles Bronson took your wife story. It's, everybody will tell you something a little different and swear it's true, or their cousin from Canada who you will never meet told them that or whatever.
Right, right.
But, if you want to believe it, it certainly does no harm.
So let me see here. So basically, my notes are not the best, but they do have an escape that gets they have another escape that gets botched.
Yeah.
Um, Eventually, of the people who get out, and what I thought was interesting is the stars don't all escape, or they escape, but they don't. Like Steve McQueen's character, in a way, was a Ferris Bueller. It was Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like, going to go, and even Dickie Attenborough's character of Bartlett, when he gets caught, he was happy that he got that little time out there in the world. And it was almost, in a way, that was almost the story of it. Coburn does get away. He gets to Spain. I believe, and it was funny about this movie too, is I realize how bad I am with geography. Like I always forget how those countries are all in Europe are all connected to each other.
States. It's like going from Pennsylvania to New York.
Yeah, it's like I'm going to Sweden, and then there's a mountain. It's like holy shit.
Yeah, it's
I just
across
for
the
some
mountain.
reason that always amazes me still, even though I know it. I know it, but I forget it all the time.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, that ending, it wasn't what I expected. Again,
mhm,
I hadn't seen the movie until just a month ago.
yeah,
And that's that thing you hear all the time now. I hate it where they go, well, you can't make that movie anymore.
I
It-
hate when they say that
I
too.
hate
Me,
that
me and you
too.
are like brothers. I hate when
Ah,
people say that. They always say it about Blazing Saddles. Blazing Saddles, first of all, it was made, so who the fuck cares? But
right.
second of all, Mel Brooks, people know Mel Brooks and they know where he was coming from. You can do that type of humor if people understand where you're coming from. The people who say that want to hear
The
the
N
N
word
word with no context or no,
consequence.
that's what they're bitching about.
Yeah. In this
You really
case,
are. You really rouse my ire there. Is that an
yeah,
expression? Is that even an expression? Rouse
I,
my ire.
it is if you said it. I'm. But what I meant with The Great Escape and the ending to it, and you can't make
Hmm.
movies like that anymore. First of all, it wouldn't be a movie, it would be a streaming, and it wouldn't be 3 hours. It would probably be about 10 hours turned into
Hmm.
10 1 hour episodes.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
but in this version, in the 2024 version of Great Escape, there would be a happier ending. Steve McQueen's character
Yep.
would not only jump that fence, you'd see him riding away and giving the finger to the
Hmm.
Nazis.
Right.
You every and they talk in the
With
early
no hands on the handlebars.
exactly.
He would jump the fence, do a flip.
Maybe a little anachronistic heavy metal guitar riff in it. But yeah,
I'll
is
tell you what
dying.
too. It's funny that you say that too, because they remade The Mechanic with Charles Bronson. And what
Mhm.
makes the movie The Mechanic so great? Spoiler alert, if anybody's never seen it. Am I going to spoil the movie for you?
I don't have it on my list of movies
Okay.
to see before I
Well,
die. If I run through that list, my next one will be The Mechanic.
he dies in the end of it, right?
Oh,
And then he gets revenge, but he gets revenge from beyond the grave because he had a feeling the guy was going to kill him, so he sets a bomb in the guy's car. So it's a really cool ending. But the remake with Jason Statham or whoever the hell they remade it with, one of them bald guys, uh, like at the end you see him like I think in his that version they blew his car up and you see him roll out so they can make nine sequels. You know what I mean?
exactly. Exactly.
Eh,
Well, plus, it says, I think in The Rock's contract now, it says that he can never lose a fight. And I know that was, I know that I think that's true. At least that's legend. And I know for sure that Steven Seagal insisted that he never lose a fight.
well,
Um,
he's a great actor, so I
yeah,
think if he
he's
wants,
one of our finest.
have you know what? Let's forget The Great Escape. Have you ever seen the reality show where Steven Seagal's a cop?
I've only heard the stand-up comedy. Somebody gives a stand-up comedy routine about it. It sounds hilarious.
It's funny because everybody he arrests, uh, a lot of the people he arrests are African American gentlemen, and they're all so excited that Steve Seagal they're getting
Yeah.
arrested. They're like, "It's out for justice," or like or whatever movie he was in. Oh,
Now,
that
I
cracked
never
me up.
worked with Steve. I almost worked with Steven Seagal.
Mhm.
I was going to jump on a movie that a friend was prop mastering and be his assistant to help him out. It was a Steven Seagal movie. And then I got a call to do another movie where I would get to be the prop master instead. And it was a road movie. So I get to go on the road and go out all these places. So I had
Yeah,
to, I had to disappoint my friend. And I also got away from Steven Seagal, who has a reputation of being an asshole. Speaking of which,
yeah.
may segue, by the way, Michael Winner, I don't know if you know this, among us crew people, is a notorious asshole.
Oh, that is
People do
very,
not want to
very,
work,
very well
never
known.
wanted to work with Michael Winner.
We had Robert F. Lyons on, who was an actor who worked with Charles Bronson in several films, and he was in Death Wish 2. And Michael Winner would call for a shoot time at like 10 a.m. and then not show up for 2 hours. And Robert F. Lyons like basically got fired from Death Wish 2 because he told him to go F himself, basically.
Uh-huh.
And Michael Winner wound up hiring him back to be in the movie or something like that. Wait, what was it? He was fired from one movie, or he met with him for one movie, got fired. I don't know, but yes, Michael Witter, before he died, he had a website or a Facebook page or something called Winners Dinners. He spent the last 10 years of his life or so just trashing restaurants, like writing these restaurant reviews that were like really mean. Like I wouldn't feed this food to my dog and stuff like that. But he got a kick out of being that character, I think. And Robert F. Lyons said like he gave him Robert F. Lyons kind of gave a load of shit back to Winter, and he says like after that, Winter kind of respected him. So I think an odd character, a
Yeah.
very odd character, and uh possibly if he was still alive would be Me Too probably because evidently those rape scenes in the Death Wish movies, some of them. were closed sets, and they took like they were 2 days long. Women were quitting, saying this is ridiculous. Like
Mm.
what, yeah, yeah. And I'm a Michael Winner fan. I mean, he's made a few of my favorite Bronson movies, although, they are some of the more brutal ones. But yeah, he is a notorious dick. I believe Eric oh man, I'm draw Dog Day Afternoon. You ever see Dog Day Afternoon?
Of course.
The
God.
trans character. Who plays the trans character in that?
Oh, Chris Sarandon.
Chris Sarandon recently was interviewed and was talking shit about Michael Winner. I believe it was a film called The Sentinel or something.
Mm.
Evidently, he was a big, huge prick on that. But yeah, no.
No, I've been watching that.
Knowing about Bronson means knowing about Winner. Like
Yeah.
it's just kind of goes hand in hand. Yeah, they were like, they what did they do? Five, Stone Killer, Death Wish 2, Death Wish 1, Death Wish 3, and Chateau's Land. Yeah, so they did 5 films together. I, the only person he did more films with was J. Lee Thompson.
Mm. Jay Lee was a good veteran journeyman director. I like some of his movies.
He was a
But
great director. He was a great director early on, but he admits to selling out to Hollywood. He admits to just,
well, he did at least one of the Planet of the Apes sequels. I think
mhm,
maybe the fourth one. And so,
yeah.
for me, if you did a Planet of the Apes movie, I don't care. I'm on your side. I'm a Planet of the Apes fanatic. So there you go.
Man,
But
Bronson worked with quite a few people that made James Bond movies. So I know J. Lee Thompson
Guy
made a James
Hamilton
Bond.
and
Peter Hunt made a James Bond movie. Some other director. Who else? There's a lot of James Bond connections to Bronson and Bronson
well, that makes
film.
sense. Directors with action film experience and action film at
Hmm.
that time, right? 70s and even 80s, it really wasn't that ramped up hyperkinetic stuff we have today. Or even I think once like Rambo came out and I think some of the Bronson movies too, and the Schwarzenegger movies, I think that
Yeah,
raised the stakes of what was expected of an action movie. You
a
watch.
lot of the new action movies give me a headache, though.
Yeah, it's
I
relentless. There's no breathing space whatsoever.
No,
It's
yeah, there's
boring.
no. I kind of like you were talking earlier, like uh I kind of like enjoy like a slow movie. The Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood, like I love that
Yeah,
movie. It's
yeah.
like yeah, it's slow build up to No Country for Old Men.
Or even a good
Uh
action movie. If you see something like The Matrix, or you see something, I don't know, if you or the Bourne movies, if you
mhm,
have me interested in the character, I'll follow them, and
right,
I care if they fall off the building or not.
right,
Whereas if you don't really give me a character that I can find anything of interest, they're just this blank slate action dude or superhero.
yeah.
I
And
don't
I have
care.
no idea what is appealing about, and I'm gonna upset a lot of my friends and listeners, but I don't see what's appealing about John Wick. His
Uh,
dog gets killed. I can feel for the dog getting killed, but other than that, I watched one of those movies and it's just shooting for 20 minutes and I get a headache.
I think that's kind of the appeal of it. I've seen just the first one, and I saw it.
Mhm.
I
That's all
worked
I
on it.
saw too.
I worked a
Oh,
bit
did
on
you?
it. I day played on it, and I predicted when I heard about it, I said this is going to be the biggest bomb ever, and boy was I wrong.
Yeah, it's
But
huge.
I want
Friends of mine love those movies, and
mine
I
too. So I want to give it a chance. I want to give it a rewatch sometime, and maybe all of them if I find the first one is.
maybe I should give it a chance again too, because I do like the actor who passed away that works in it. He was on the TV show Bosch, African American gentleman. I can't think of his name.
I don't know that one.
He just passed it way too young.
But you
Way
know what
too
I like?
young.
But sometimes, here's the thing. Again, it depends on the mood, it depends on the tone. But sometimes like a martial arts movie, or even like Tarantino's Kill Bill, especially the first volume,
Mhm.
or a Monty Python movie, where the
Yeah.
violence and the action is so relentless and so ridiculous, it gets hyped up to this insane level that it becomes funny. It's
Hmm.
and it goes over the edge, and I'm actually with you because I want to see like how crazy is this shit gonna get? You know,
Well,
how
Death Wish 3
uh,
is like that. Death Wish
yeah,
3 is you should watch Death Wish 3. I I love it. It's nonstop. It's insanity. Bronson comes out on a balcony with a machine gun with a strip of bullets coming through it. All because it is just, according to Paul Talbot, and I agree with him, once Rambo came out, everybody had to do a Rambo. So now Paul Kersey, who's a street vigilante, is now like plowing down kids that are just throwing rocks.
yeah.
And but I love that movie. It doesn't give me a headache the way I just something about these newer ones. They're just, I don't
Well,
know,
here's the thing
the
too.
cars can do everything. The cars can go sideways and up a wall and
Yeah,
all.
CGI has made it too easy to the point of like, yeah, you're exactly right. The car can go up the side of the Grand Canyon. Who the
Yeah.
fuck cares? We know that's not real. And yeah, I mean, we know that Star Wars isn't real either, but at least Star Wars can make us imagine that this could be real. But we know the Grand Canyon. We know
Yeah.
there's just a certain point. You watch something on TV and commercials, the CGI or the AI Coke commercial, and you're like, this just looks fake. It looks
Yeah.
kind of real, but it feels fake. But I just want to say one thing too, again, about action heroes in general. And maybe
Mhm.
this happened with Bronson, you can tell me, but like I love the first Die Hard movie. You know, that character, Paul McClane, Bruce Willis. And with each successive Die Hard, he got more and more indestructible to the point
Yeah.
by the last one, he is like flying a car into a helicopter and coming out of it alive. And it's like, come on, man. I
Yeah.
much prefer he's not super brave in the first one. He's only doing what he does because he has to. His back is up against the wall.
Hmm.
And he experiences pain when he's in bare feet walking across broken
Yeah. I
glass.
love Die Hard. The original Die Hard is
Hey,
great.
make the character at least a little vulnerable, and
Right.
me. I sympathize. I'm that guy too.
Yeah. The Death Wish movies, they just, so Charles Bronson, believe it or not, did not like to overexert himself too much. So he wasn't really it's been like he was it's been said that he was supposed to do certain things in a movie. He was like, "Oh, how about I just do this instead?" Because he didn't want to he didn't really want to overexert himself. But like at like 72, Death Wish 5, he's like he jumps off a building and he poisons the guy's cannoli. Like he becomes he
He
just be
hits him with his cane.
he makes a he makes a he buys a remote control soccer ball and makes a bomb out of it and blows the guy up. It's just like it's and then the director and writer claim that they wanted to make it a comedy and that Bronson agreed. But I'm thinking the movie was just silly and they said that after the fact. I don't know. But I mean I love those movies, but I'd rather watch Mr. Majestic, a Richard Fleischer film he did uh in the early 70s. I'd rather watch The Stone Killer. Rider on the Rain is a French film that he did before he hit big in America. Rider on the Rain, Farewell Friend with Alain Delon, Red Sun with Alain Delon and Toshiro Mifune, and a film called Cold Sweat with James Mason. Uh, I love those flicks. I'm a big fan of right before he hit big in America when he was making these European films, and he was
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes sense too. I mean, that Bronson always played a character of few words, right? So
Mhm.
you don't need to worry about, well, how is this going to come across to international audiences? It's like, well, he's not saying much. You could put any language in the film you want. The characters could be speaking any language. You could send it across, and it's going to be Charles Bronson nodding his head or squinting his eyes, and that's
No,
fine.
but I got to correct you on that though. That's why I say that Michael Winner, Charles Bronson, because before Chato's Land and Death Wish, he actually played these more like fun, vibrant characters that it would you can't win them all with him and Tony Curtis. Like he's like a almost like he plays these like rascally type characters with a sense of
Huh.
humor and a
You haven't
gleam in
seen
his
that.
eye.
I have
Yeah,
seen,
give
yeah, I have
watch
seen ones that
watch
come out.
Rider on the Rain. If you want to watch, if I could assign you a film where you'll see him a good acting, I believe a good film, and just get to see a different him play something different, but he's also still that that stone. He's like I don't know how to explain it, but there's like he- he's got charisma in a lot of those films where
He's
I
got
believe,
charisma.
yeah. Check out Rider on the Rain. I'm assigning that to you.
Okay. Hey,
That's
by the
your
way,
assignment.
too, okay,
What's
T,
that?
have you ever, do you go online? There's a blog, online blog called every70smovie.com. Do you know of this?
No, but
Oh,
I
you
listen
dig
to
it.
a podcast sometimes called Films We Saw in the '70s. It's not those guys, is it?
No, it's a guy. It's one man who
Mhm.
has making it his mission to watch literally every movie that came out in the 1970s and to
Wow.
write a short paragraph about it and give it a rating of either groovy or lame or far out, some 70s.
I definitely have to find that
He's
because
he's
the
real
Films
good.
We Saw in the '70s is a really good podcast. Um, it's long. They do a real pretty big introduction and they go into the movie and all that, but it's very good. It's interesting.
Yeah, when I went
Mike McPadden was a part of it who passed away.
McBeardo. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I read, I go to every70smovie.com almost every night before I go to bed and just read a couple of them. They're little bite size, you can get through one of them in a minute.
Yeah,
And
I would love that. I'm definitely
I'll
gonna
lie
check
there
that
in
out.
bed. And I'm a 70s kid. I'm 60 years old now. I grew up in the 70s when movies like Death Wish and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and the original Rocky and the original Star Wars, all that
Mhm.
jazz, Apocalypse Now, all of these movies came out, and I saw them in, well, I eventually saw some of them I saw them all in theaters eventually. I mean, I was too young to see Death Wish until I was in college, but I did read the Mad Magazine parody of it, which was
Yeah.
Death Wisher or something like that. And
Right.
but that for me was a marvelous time. It was my coming of age of being a movie fanatic. And I think I was very fortunate to have come of age at that time when movies did have downer endings, when you could kill the star, and that was audiences tolerated that. And you didn't necessarily have
Yeah.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest Part Two, The Revenge, or anything like that.
Right. Exactly. I love
You
one for
told a story
I
and you walked away.
I grew up in the '80s, but my favorite, with the exception of course, like Goonies and Back to the Future, like those big ones.
Yeah,
My favorite era is the '70s. I think it's probably because I got into Bronson, but I think also because TBS and UHF channels were playing all those movies in the '80s.
100%.
The $1 Million Movie, you know what I mean, on Sunday or Saturday night. And
Yeah.
then somehow along the way, that wound up being my favorite era of music too. I'm a big Deep Purple, Blue Oyster Cult fan.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, and I'm not sure how that happened, to be honest with you. So yeah, it's like a lot of times people think I'm a lot older than I am, and I don't really care because I mean, I love old stuff. And I like a lot of new stuff too. There's some really
Yeah.
good directors out there.
Yeah.
There's some interesting writers out there. I just saw a really neat movie recently. We're going way off tangent here, but it's a Swedish movie called Border. If you don't
Hmm.
mind reading the bottom of the screen and you like Swedish folklore, but like mixed into like a modern kind of mystery and kind of some really dark, it goes into some dark subject matter. Border is a really cool flick. Um, and it's written by the person who wrote Let the Right One In, which is
Oh,
my favorite Swedish vampire movie. Well, it's probably the only
there's
Swedish
so
vampire
many.
movie I've ever seen.
Right.
But no, it's my favorite vampire movie.
Oh, well, I'll check out Border then just based on
Yeah,
that.
it's on Tubi, believe it or not. I
Yeah.
mean, it should be. But anyway,
Yeah, no,
we're at
listen,
the,
one quick end to the tangent, if I may, is that
yeah.
as a 60-year-old, I
Mhm.
try really hard not to be that dude that's like everything after my childhood sucked.
Right.
No, I've got 20 somethings as children, and they
Hmm.
listen to hip hop, they listen to Taylor Swift or Beyonce or whatever, or artists I couldn't tell you because I can't remember their names. I'll give that a try. You know, when I get in the car, I
Yeah.
have no choice because they're going to take over the playlist and play what they want to hear. And that's fine for me. It's like I've heard Talking Heads so many times. I love them still, but I don't need to hear Talking Heads over and over and over again. Yeah, let me hear something
Right.
new. I may not like it, but at least I can say, you know what, I gave it a shot. And same with movies, same with TV, same with everything. Let me give it a try. I mean, what's the worst can happen is I waste what, an hour or two of my life? I've wasted many hours of my life
Right.
on worse things. So
I'm
why?
the same way. I'm the same way. I'm very so my other obsession is I grew up playing in punk rock bands. I like a lot of punk and new wave, and I also was really into heavy metal. So people know that I love music. And one of my friends asked me on his podcast, like, because I have that young son, like, what do you think his first concert will be? What do you want to take him to for his first concert? And I said he was expecting me to say Iron Maiden or my favorite band's the Ramones. They're all dead, but he was expecting me to say something like Iron Maiden or um, Cheap Trick or Blue Oyster Cult. And I said, hopefully it'll be something that he likes, you
That's right.
know. But you know what I mean. And so because it's his time, you know what I mean. And when he
Right.
goes to a concert, he's probably going to be a teenager. Like I'm not taking him now; he's a little kid, but yeah, and also by Spotify, a girl I worked with who's about 24 made me a Spotify list of all this female driven indie rock and with some pop in there like Chappelle Roan and Taylor Swift, but
Sure.
there's but also like singer songwriters like Adrian Lenker and a group called Mannequin Pussy. And when it's soothing kind of indie pop type stuff. It's all I listen to on Spotify outside of podcasts. So when they
Ah,
did the Spotify wrap up, there wasn't one punk band or metal band. It looked like I was a 24-year-old girl, and I'm fine with that because I love this playlist that she made for me. You know what I mean?
for a 24-year-old girl, you're not very attractive. I got to just be honest with you.
Yeah, but for a 49-year-old guy, I'm pretty hot. You
You're
got to
rocking
admit.
it. You're rocking it. Sure. Hey, listen, yeah, you've got my email address. You know, if you've got that playlist, sure, I'll listen to it.
Oh yeah, I'll send it your way. I'm sure
Again,
you.
it all
I
depends.
think you'd like it. You're like an open-minded guy like me. I think
It
it's
does. It all
important
depends.
if we say get off my lawn, nobody's gonna remember. The point is that we're trying to keep names alive,
That's
right?
right.
And if we act like old guys, who's gonna listen to us?
Yeah, and listen, sometimes I act like a much older guy than I am. I
Mhm,
love Louis Armstrong. I love Ella Fitzgerald. I love
mhm.
Nina Simone.
Yeah.
I love, this my favorite music of all is the soul and R&B of not only the 60s and not only Motown, but Atlantic and stuff, Otis
Oh
Redding,
yeah.
Aretha Franklin, but even into the 70s when it started to slide into disco with the more heavier orchestrations and stuff, but it's still my favorite music ever. And
This
so,
time last year, I saw Darlene Love in concert,
oh my God, that would have been fantastic.
and
Plus, my father, he's
She
still
was
alive.
81 or 82, and
Yeah,
she was incredible.
of
Her voice
course.
was still strong
Of course.
as hell.
As I keep saying, it all depends on your mood. Sometimes I'm
Mhm.
in the mood for the Ramones. Sometimes I'm in the mood for a little acoustic guitar and a young lady, singing about her boyfriends. I don't care if that's what I want to hear at the time. I don't apologize for it, and
Right.
if I'm driving in a car and the traffic's bad, I don't want this raucous noise in my head. On the other hand, if I'm going 65 miles an hour and passing cars and stuff, yeah, I do want to hear Running Down a Dream by Tom Petty because
Mhm.
that's that kind of music for that kind of mood.
Right. Right. I agree with you on that. So let's wrap up this movie.
Let's
These
wrap up
guys,
the
these
movie.
guys escape, but most of them don't really make it.
Yeah.
50 of them get killed. The only people that I remember to get away, just James Coburn gets away. There's a scene where he's at a cafe, and the French waiters tell him he's got a phone call, and he's like, "Well, how would I have a phone call? You know, he's escaped from." But they were really getting him to come over so he could duck because they knew the French resistance was coming to shoot the Nazis. So that was pretty cool. And then they were able to get him a guide to get him to Spain, which was cool. So I'm glad to see Coburn. I love James Coburn. I could go
Yeah.
on for another hour about James Coburn.
Oh, absolutely.
Um,
And if listen, if at the beginning of the movie, if you were laying bets down as to who's going to make it and who isn't, you'd probably pick McQueen as your top choice, Garner. And then Coburn would be somewhere in the middle of that, I'd figure, the sort of
and
calm
let's talk about
character.
that scene. Like, so I had seen the movie before, but for some friggin' reason, my brain remembers Steve McQueen jumping a fence and getting away, but he
That's
doesn't.
yeah,
But my brain remembers that somehow. And I'm watching the movie, I'm like, wow, I guess that's what they call the Mandela effect or something.
that is it.
Although I think that's a weird term because they said that comes from people thinking Mandela was dead, which like people don't really follow what's going on in history and stuff. So I think it's a weird I don't think it's the same thing, but
But it
whatever. It
but
doesn't
it's
freaking
stuck.
matter.
Yeah, you're not going to change it single-handedly. So I think we just
Right.
live with it.
But yeah, so yeah, he gets caught. Um, Danny and Willie escape. They make it to a boat. There's some romantic music playing, and I don't know why. Um,
What, you don't love a happy romantic ending?
well, not with Charles Bronson. You know what I mean? Not you know what I mean? Not that there's anything wrong with that,
Not that there's
but
anything wrong with that.
listen, Charles Bronson, he's well, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, and a bunch of them get caught and they get taken to a dungeon, and Garner steals a plane at one point.
Yeah. And his relationship with Donald Pleasance, that's a very sweet relationship
It
too.
was. Yeah, and he gets shot. And as he's dying, he thanks him for getting him out.
Yeah.
Like he was just glad that he got out, you know?
Again, Garner is one of those actors that he's so relaxed and so confident that it's like if he's delivering a soliloquy and with roses are red, violets are blue to Donald Pleasance, you go along with it. It's like, okay, I respect this man. I want to be this man. He's
Yeah.
masculine, not in that Joe Rogan kind of way. He's
Yeah.
unapologetically who he
How
is.
great is James Garner, man? He's so
How
great.
great is he? I saw him in Sayonara not long ago with Brando, and he's much younger there. And he's like, oh, this guy can do this sort of light comedy. He's a
Hmm.
very good light comedic actor.
I love the Rockford Files. It was reruns for me, of course.
Yeah.
I think it was on when I was real little, or maybe before I was born. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'd
But
watched that with my dad when it came
mhm.
on in the 70s. My dad loved that show, and I'd sit there and watch it with him, but I didn't really get it. The same way I didn't get Barney Miller. It's like I know he likes it, so I guess I'll stick around.
Yeah, I never got Barney Miller.
I do now that I'm an old man, but that's
I
that's
don't know. I never understood how Rockford made money. Like he
yeah.
didn't seem to ever be making money off anybody.
We lived in a trailer. I guess he was paid for.
So so basically um Bartlett, they're all down in that dungeon type things, and Bartlett says like this really poignant thing, like, I'm just glad I was out for a little bit. He goes, I never felt more alive. But then sadly they all get shot down like by the filthy Nazis. I hear a lot of bad things about them.
I don't think they're very fine people.
No, no. And you find out 50 of them were shot while escaping. Um, they read the names of the dead, which I thought, and the one Nazi character, it might have been the commandant. He seemed kind of sympathetic when he was telling um them that the 50 of them were dead, which is like which I find strange. I feel like in today's if today's climate, I don't think a moviegoer would make a Nazi character sympathetic at all. I don't think, but
No, you know, it's tricky stuff, and
mhm,
I am Protestant, but I am a movie goer and a person who appreciates story and character. And Nazis were Nazis, but Nazis
mhm,
were also human beings, and
mhm.
I it's very easy to say, well, they were all monsters because they were all complicit. Even the ones who weren't wearing the uniforms were complicit and responsible for, millions and millions of deaths. And on the other hand, if you're going to portray them as characters in a story, you can choose to portray them as human, giving them moments of both. You can give them empathy, a moment of empathy, but that doesn't mean you make them the good guys. There's
Right, right.
fine, there's nuance, and the good filmmakers and good storytellers can do that. I think even Spielberg had some of that in Schindler's List. It wasn't all those monstrous Nazis like in his own Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think there was more nuance to the Ralph Fiennes character, for example.
Mhm. And one of the character, James Garner's character returns uh, back to the prison, Bob Hendley, and somebody mentions, that Roger's idea was to get back at the enemy, mess up the works. You know what I mean? And Garner says, "Was it worth the price?" Or no, someone says, "Was it worth the price to him?" And he says, "Depends on your point of view." So I that's where I kind of got that vibe that like, okay, they didn't escape, but they succeeded in like fucking up the system for a little bit there. It
It's a
was a little
moral,
bit of Breakfast Club, a little bit Ferris Bueller's Day Off with Nazis.
Yeah, it's a moral victory, kind of like Rocky at the end of the first Rocky movie. He doesn't win the fight, but he did something. He set out to do something, and he did it. And that's heroic in its own way, knowing that you're probably going to lose, but you do it anyway because you feel you have to. So that's heroism. And
Yeah,
again, I think that's missing in a lot of movies now, says Grandpa
right.
Wilson, where you know, you
Yeah,
you know that Tom Cruise is going to win. You know that Jason Statham is going to win. They just will. There's no
right.
moral victories. They're going to get everything.
Exactly. And as the film comes to a close, uh, they're returning Steve McQueen's character Hilt, the Cooler King, to the cooler, and his buddy. Buddy throws him his ball in his glove, and he goes back in, and there's that Nazi again. The one who I felt was like kind of curious about him. He turns and he looks back, and he's just got this look on his face like this freaking guy. He's okay. He's all right. He's okay no matter what we do to him. Like,
Wouldn't
and
have
I
been
think
funny? Wouldn't have been funny if they'd done one where it's the slow clap, where like a bunch of the Nazis are like,
we can't stay mad at these guys. But
"Damn it,
yeah,
we respect you."
and the movie ends with him bouncing his ball. That's what he did to
Yeah.
survive the cooler. And nowadays, there'd be a part two where it starts off with him bouncing the ball till the wall came down, and then I don't know.
Well,
But
yeah,
hey,
it's again, the movies takes place at the time when the war was drawing to a close, and the
mhm.
Nazis kind of had it in their guts that they were not gonna win this one. So, I mean, if they had extended it to a 4 hour version, it could have been in the fourth hour. It turns out the ones like Steve McQueen and the Cooler, the ones that survived, they get out anyway, because the war's over and the Paris Accords and so forth say they have to go home.
We've almost extended this to a 4 hour episode.
Good luck to you editing it. You can turn it into a two-parter. I don't
Hey,
care.
that's yeah, Danny does that, but no,
Whatever he wants. My apologies.
we just released the whole goddamn thing. We don't care.
Whatever you want, man, I'm all for. Thank you for letting me plug my show a little bit.
We're gonna cut it down to that real small part where you say Nazis are human beings. It's just
That's
gonna be like, ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring Danny Fisher on, and you're just gonna I would say, Danny, what do you think of Great Escape? Nazis are human beings, and we're just gonna play that clip over and
very
over.
fine fellows.
Before we go, well, who's your favorite character in this film? Did you have a favorite character?
I
I mean,
think
there's
it
too many. There might be
Well,
too
no, you
many.
know what?
There might be too many.
I think it's Garner as the scrounger because
Hmm.
in my career as a prop person, that's been my job. It's like we need these things. We have no resources to
Hmm.
attain them. Well, I'll get it anyway. That's what is expected of me, and that's my job. And I have like one hundredth of the charm that James Garner had. But a lot of times that's how I'd have to do it, is to sort of charm my way into getting stuff that we had no money for or no time for, but we get it anyway because we got to shoot it the next day. So I
Right.
think I identified the most with him, but I loved Bronson in this. I really did. I thought it was the performance I've seen from him that made me go like, oh, I like this guy. I like Danny. And I
I feel
understand.
like he's very good in these in his 60s. In these ensemble, he did this, Dirty Dozen, Magnificent Seven. One that did not set the box offices on fire, but is a very fine movie called The Battle of the Bulge.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, I think some of his best work was in the 60s in these films, and in a
Once
lot of
Upon a
his.
Time in the West.
Oh my God, yeah, well
Yeah.
that's like most of my page's favorite. Like most of them will tell you that's their favorite film. Yeah, that's another great one. He's
All the
great in
things.
that. Yeah. So where can people hear Let's Talk 10? Where all podcasts are sold and
Yeah, it's on Spotify and
okay.
it's on Apple Podcasts. There's a platform called Overview which carries it, and also Amazon Music, I understand, carries it. And I have a website that's very meager to the point of being just kind of embarrassing, but it's letstalk10podcast.com. No, no, let's talk 10 podcast buzzsprout.com. Buzzsprout
Oh,
is my parent carrier, and they're
okay.
fine. They're very good. They've been very good to me. So let's talk
Excellent.
10. But listen, just go to Spotify. Don't worry about the website.
Right. Just
Or
type
go,
it in it. Type it into a
yeah.
search engine and something will come up.
And listen, on Facebook, I'm constantly trying to get people to listen. I'm constantly posting little pop culture related things or things related to whatever episode I have happening at the
Right.
moment. So I'm on Facebook, Dan Fisher. And, if you're wondering which of the, 50 Dan Fishers I am, it's the one who's friends with Eric Todd. That might give
There
you.
you go.
And on there, you'll see I'm always providing links to episodes, both new and old, to try to drum up new business. And I'd love to have people listen to my show, and I'll try to plug your show, when I can, because you're right. We little DIY podcasters in our basements or our living rooms, we got to look out for each other. We got to stand up
Yeah.
for each other.
That's true, and I do think our listeners are gonna will like your show because I think from talking to my co-host Brad couldn't be here today, but me and him we love Fanachek, so we love any of these pop culture shows that like just have a lot of information, but also a lot of talk from the fan point of view. I think I think there's a lot of room for people like enthusiasts instead of like experts. Like when I first started this, I thought I'm going to be the Bronson expert. And then I realized, whoa, but when I opened that Facebook page, I was like, whoa, there's a lot of people that know more than me. So like, okay, I'm going to be doing this show from the point of view of a really big fan. And that's, that's a lot of fun too. I love what you do and I'm going to keep listening to you.
I
And
appreciate it.
ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to This Week in Charles Bronson. I am your host, Eric Todd, and you've been listening to Let's Talk Tens podcasts, Danny Fisher. Good night.
Good night. Thank you so much.